We are back with a look now at what's motivating the youngest group of voters in this election. More than half of Gen Z voters worry they'll never be able to afford to buy a house. That's according to a recent survey from a Missouri-based real estate company. That was a similar stat from our Stay Tuned Gen Z poll back in September. And nearly a third of Gen Zers said the issue that matters most to them is the economy. That's from an October NBC News Stay Tuned Gen Z poll powered by SurveyMonkey. We have CEO and founder of The Conversationalist, Sophie Barron, joining us now on set. Sophie, good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Happy Election Day.
Can't believe it's here.
You are decked out. I love the shirts. Like, this is so exciting. Let's talk through that issue that I mentioned there and the economy of it, because we're trying to understand, right, how young voters feel about each candidate. And polls, while they put Harris ahead pretty consistently within this generation, first of all, we are seeing something happen with young men and a break there for Trump. And then also that economy issue, we often are hearing people say that they think that former President Trump would do a better job with it. What do you think young people are feeling about both of these candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the numbers lie. Right now, we're seeing young Americans support Harris over Trump by a 20-point lead. But that doesn't discount the young people who are voting for Trump, right? The 30% of young people that are supporting him mean that when you're in front of a group of 3 young people, 1 in 3 are going to be voting for President Trump. And I think it's important to remember that no one really benefits from looping all young people together and thinking that they all feel the same way. And at the end of the day, I think young people are supporting what they care about versus who. And I think what they care about and the issues are time and time again what young people will show up for and show out for in an election rather than a specific candidate. So I think it's important to remember that not all young people think the same, but it makes sense that young people are showing up more for Harris over Trump because she represents a lot of the issues that young people care most deeply about.
One of those issues, and I've heard this when I've been out on the trail over and over again from young people, is abortion. But what do you think we will see? Do you think that will be, and this is the key word here, it might not be somebody's most important issue or what they think impacts their life, but in a lot of polls it's shown as the most motivating issue, the one that's going to mean that somebody will make sure they complete the assignment today of showing up at the polls is to vote on how they feel on abortion. Either way, by the way. Sure. But what do you think that might mean for young people?
I think, again, we can't lump all young people together, but certainly abortion rights is one of the biggest issues of our generation's time, in addition to what you spoke about in terms of economy, cost of living, gun violence, climate, and one of the biggest issues that just came up for young people more recently in polling is threats to democracy. And so I think overall, young people getting involved in this election and showing up for the conversation, right? When Harris announced her candidacy, young people finally entered the chat. They wanted to be a part of this conversation. And I think we're seeing that these issues will directly impact their future. And there's something about this election where the stakes feel so much higher. So I think whether your central issue is abortion rights or it's gun violence or it's climate or it's economy, these are the reasons why young people will show up, because it really directly impacts what their life will look like beyond November 5th.
The big question, I think, hanging over this, though, and I have been trying to get a pulse on this myself, is just simply, will Gen Z turn out in a significant way? We know, again, and I really appreciate you continuing to say, because it's so important, Gen Z is not a monolith whatsoever, but they have the potential to really impact the election in terms of just the size of the voting bloc that they are, the number of people who even just became eligible this year to vote in their first election. I think early indications are showing, like I know in a state like North Carolina, I was on the phone yesterday with campus advocates across that state where they have been extremely organized and intense about their efforts to get out the vote with young people. They said 20 campuses have already outperformed an early vote than in 2020. Do you think we see that across the country and, importantly, in those 7 battleground states? Will Gen Z show up in a way that you think we haven't seen them show up before?
I'm optimistic. Right? I think the data that we have from the midterms was that Gen Z really showed up in larger numbers than millennials and older generations did at their age. And those numbers give me great hope that there is more and more reason for young people to show up and vote. The community that we have at The Conversationalist across our campuses shows time and time again that young people are coming to the polls in droves because these issues that they're voting for are the ones that will again, impact the future that they are inheriting. But I think it's too soon to know exactly how much young people will turn out to vote. I have a lot of conversations with young people on the street around the country, and there are a lot of young people who still feel a little bit disempowered by our system. And I've spoken to a few that have told me that they're not going to vote at all. And I think, if anything, this points to the fact that we have to continue engaging young people in the conversation in order to expect them to turn out at the polls, right? There's a recent study that just came out that said 48% of Gen Z has lied about their vote.
Oh, yes.
And if anything, I think it's
Vibe survey. I saw that as well. And I think that that's really telling. I do also think that that tells us that we don't actually know where a lot of that support lies.
Absolutely.
Right? We don't know for sure.
And the only way to find that out is to actually allow young people to feel heard. How are we going to know if they're voting, let alone who they're voting for, if we're not creating the environment to listen and learn from young people and why they're motivated or not motivated at all to show up at the polls? And I think that, again, points a through line to why threats to democracy has become a leading issue for young people as well. You know, we're unable to have these real conversations about how we've gotten here and how Gen Z's entire upbringing has been in an environment where all of these issues have really come to a head for them. And we have to have those conversations in order to know where we go from here.
Absolutely. Sophie Barron, you will be with us throughout the morning. Thank you for being here so far. We can't wait to talk to you in just a little bit. Happy Election Day.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.